Howdy. So my name's Corey Peltier. I'm a professor at the University of Oklahoma. This is our third video in a series on progress monitoring. And today we're going to talk about specifically early numeracy curriculum-based measurement.
I'm Cynthia Massey. I teach at Georgia Southern, and thank you for joining us.
So remember, one of the questions we're going to continually come back to are what curriculum-based measures are available to progress monitor, right? Our whole goal here is using CBM and that data to inform instruction. And today we're focused on what CBMs are available to progress monitor my student performance in early numeracy. And so our objectives for today are talk about the purpose, the benefits, and then we're going to look at the different types of CBMs available. And within each of those subheadings, we're going to talk about the materials, the administration protocol, the scoring, and the time required. And then we'll talk about some decisions you can make with the data and then additional resources where you can find some paid and free CBMs. So the purpose. So remember, going back to our first video, when we think about using early numeracy CBMs, we can look at screening, right? So these can be very static that we administer in the fall, winter, spring, just as a thermometer check. And I want you to keep thinking about that metaphor of a thermometer. These are going to tell you if a student's at risk or not at risk, but it's not providing any diagnostic data to tell you, well, why is the student struggling? You're going to need to do additional types of assessments to figure that out. We also can use these early numeracy CBMs for progress monitoring. So whether we're administering them weekly or bi-weekly, we can track whether students responding to the type of mathematics instruction we're given. And all of these are kind of centered around this idea of number sense. So these are the core foundational skills that students really need to grasp in pre-K, K, and first grade. If students don't grasp these skills, they're not going to be successful in later mathematics. So the types of early CBMs, we're going to talk about 4 today. We have counting CBMs, and there's actually 2 types of counting. There's just oral rote counting, and then there's touch counting. We'll then talk about number identification, missing number, and quantity discrimination. There are additional math assessments and types of data collection we can get, but these are the big 4 that are most often used in schools.
So we'll start with counting. There's 2 types, like Corey said. There's oral and touch counting. For both of these, the materials that you need are a scoring sheet for the examiner. For the touch counting, you need a dot sheet for the students to touch and count. You need a timer so that you can time 1 minute, and you need a pencil for recording and a quiet environment to administer your CBM.
And I do want to echo back, remember, we want to try to standardize this all the time, right? So when we think about a quiet environment, make sure you're using the same environment, same administrator. All of those things are going to reduce the likelihood of us adding error to our data.
Perfect. And the same time of day, that sort of thing, just being consistent. So this is an example of the examiner's sheet, not the student, because for this one, the students are asked to count. So the directions for this consist of, I want you to start counting, beginning at the number 1 and count until I ask you to stop. You have your sample sheet, you have your sheet in front of you where you're making slashes, marking through the numbers they miss along the way, and a bracket at the end where you tell them to stop.
Yeah, and one important consideration when administering is if a student pauses for 3 seconds, you're going to provide them that number, and then they'll move on from there. So you just have to be very cognizant of if a student's pausing, that you're counting in your head to know when to prompt the student to move forward.
Perfect. So this is an example of a touch counting CBM. The one on the left is what the student would have in front of them, and the one on the right is the one that you, the examiner, would have in front of you. So you would give the directions as instructed in your protocol, and you would tell the students to point to the first one on the top left-hand side, show them the left to right motion that you expect them to go in, and on the right, you would put slash marks again through the ones that they missed and put a bracket around the one at the end after you've called time after 1 minute has ended.
Yeah, and one thing I want to echo here is you can see touch counting is a slightly more complex skill because it's requiring students to have the ability of one-to-one correspondence, being able to touch dots and just say 1 numeral at a time, rather than just oral rote counting. You can just count without having to assign a number to an object.
So the directions for these are to tell the students the instructions, set a start timer for 60 seconds. Again, like Corey said, if they stop for 3 seconds, provide the missed number, and then tell them to stop at the end of 60 seconds. To score it, you would count the total number attempted, then you would look at the ones that they missed, count the errors. To calculate the rate, you would take the items attempted, subtract the number of errors that they make, and that would give you the total correct per minute. To calculate the accuracy, you would take the total correct, divide it by the total items attempted, and then that would give you the percent that they correctly identified.
And I do want to echo here, it's really important to both get rate and accuracy. Cynthia and I are going to create one video at the end of this series discussing the instructional hierarchy, which is from Herring. And basically, it's important to both consider rate, which is obviously rate is comprised of accuracy and speed, but then looking strictly just at accuracy, because you might use slightly different instructional tactics with students depending on what their accuracy is versus what their rate is.
Great point. So the next skill we're going to talk about is number identification. The materials that you would need for this are the student's data sheet, your scoring sheet, a timer, your pencil, and again, that quiet environment.
Everything's the same, Cynthia.
It just keeps going. So again, on the left, you have an example of a student sample. This has boxes with random numbers placed within the boxes. The students are going to identify the numbers, again, in order according to the directions that are part of your protocol. In this example, you would point out that they're going to go from the first box in the top left-hand corner, from left to right, and then down to the row below. On the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see the examiner's worksheet that they would have in front of them, the CBM sheet. You simply record the numbers that they gave you, but in parentheses, you can see what would have been the correct answer. So if they make an incorrect answer, you can quickly just put a slash through it, and again, a bracket at the end when you call time after 60 seconds.
Yeah, and I want to echo here, you could just say correct or incorrect, but it is nice to get that kind of anecdotal data of what the student provided, because you might pick up on some type of misconception or common error patterns they're making.
And our directions for this are very similar to our last. You're going to read your instructions to your student, present them with their student sheet, set the start timer for 60 seconds. If they pause for 3 seconds, provide them the numbers so that they can continue to move on, and then stop the student at 60 seconds. To score this, very similar to the last, count the total attempted, count the number of errors. To calculate the rate, you take the items attempted minus your errors. That would equal the total correct per minute. And then to calculate the accuracy, you take the total numbers correct divided by the total items attempted, and that gives you your percent correct. The third one is missing number. Materials, student sheet, scoring sheet, timer, pencil, and quiet environment. On the left, you'll see a student sample, and on the right, you'll see the examiner sample, very similar to the last. There's a box, it has a series of numbers. It's missing a number in a different location. You'll notice they're randomly placed throughout. So in the first one, it's missing the last digit. In the second one, it's missing the third, but they are all in random order. They're not predictable. So on the right side, on the examiner sample, you see again, you're going to record what they tell you, but you can quickly identify without having to look up and look at their paper what was supposed to have been the correct answer. It just makes for easy grading when the time is up and you go back to look at the scores.
And one thing I will emphasize here is depending which missing number CBM you pull, some of them have 3 numbers with 1 blank. Others have, well, let me rephrase that. So on this sheet, we have 3 numbers and then there's 1 blank in the sequence. Others will have 2 numbers and 1 blank in a sequence. So there's only like 3 numbers in a number sequence. So don't think that those are automatically wrong, right? You can see some with 3, some with 4.
Our directions are to read the instructions to the student, present them with their sheet, set the start timer for 60 seconds. If they pause for 3 seconds, provide them with the response so that they'll continue, and then stop the student at 60 seconds. And to score it, you've probably started catching on here. You're going to count the total number, how many errors there are. To calculate the rate, you use the same formulas that we talked before about calculating rate and accuracy.
And we do want to echo, this is one of the reasons CBMs are so beautiful is they're so efficient to
Yes.
score, and it's the same process throughout all of these. So it's a really quick learning curve. Like you pick it up and then you become very fluent at doing it.
And I think that's what makes them so easy for classroom teachers to use. We don't have a lot of time. I can obviously spend 60 seconds with a student, a couple minutes to calculate the rate and the accuracy, and then I can move on to my next piece of instruction. So these definitely lend themselves easily to a classroom setting. So the last one we're going to talk about is quantity discrimination. Materials, your student sheet, your scoring sheet, timer, pencil for yourself, and a quiet environment. On the left, you'll see a sample of quantity discrimination, and on the right, you'll see the examiner sample. In this particular example, you're asking the students to identify the larger number of the two within each set. That would be clearly stated within the directions. The student would attempt one on their own. You would correct them if they had made a mistake so that they understood the instructions. And on the right, you would write down the response they gave you and the correct answers provided in a parenthesis.
Yeah, almost all of the quantity discrimination CBM probes that I've seen, I've always asked students to identify the greater number. So
The greater
that's
number.
particularly common, yeah.
So directions, read your instructions to your student, present them with the student sheet, set a timer for 60 seconds. If the student pauses for 3 seconds, provide them with the correct answer, and then stop the timer at 60 seconds and put a bracket around that last number so you know where they stopped. Scoring is the same as previously mentioned. To calculate the rate, how many did they attempt? Subtract the errors, that gives you the total correct per minute. To calculate the accuracy, what was that total correct number that you just found divided by the total items attempted, and that gives you the percent correct.
And one thing I want to echo, so we walk through those 4 CBMs. Typically, you're going to pull the student and do all 4. Most of the time, you're going to administer all 4 to the student and then send them on their way. And as you can tell, it's going to take you all of 5 minutes to administer those string of them, and then you can send the student and grab the next student. So it is a very low time investment on your part, but the benefit of administering and collecting that data is going to give you a lot for instructional purposes.
Absolutely. And so we have shared with you the 4 early numeracy CBMs, and also we just wanted to provide you with some resources so that you could locate your own. There's information here on this page, and if you would like to reach out to us, our contact information is on the last slide. We greatly appreciate you joining us today, and we hope you'll join us for our next CBM.
Thank y'all.
Bye.